Hi everyone, this is Sandra from Mobius Girl Design. I'm back today to talk to you a little bit about how to join the half and quarter motifs to your Marguerite blanket. Before I dive in, I do need to point out that there's a slight error in the pattern. I mentioned that for the half motifs that go along the top and the bottom of the blanket, that they should be joined in two areas, when in reality, that's true for the first motif that you join to each the top and the bottom. But the subsequent half motifs on the top and the bottom actually need to be joined in three areas because they also need to be joined to the half motif adjacent to them. So that's just one thing to keep in mind before we dive in. I'm just going to show you here briefly a little bit about how to join these. If you need more complete directions on joining the motifs, you can check out my video for joining the full motifs. Since the technique is the same, what really differs is just where you end up joining the different motifs. So here you can see I've worked a half motif almost all the way to the end. In row 11, I've worked the first area before the first point, the second area between the first 2 points, and I've left the rest unworked so that I can go ahead and start joining these. So I'm going to line up the half motif with my two adjacent full motifs. You can pretend this is either the top or the bottom of the blanket. And as before with the full motifs, I've worked the half motif up through the point to where I've changed color of the yarn, and I'm ready to start working my 10 stitches in between points. But before I do that, I will drop the loop from my hook again, insert my hook from front to back through the correct loop on the adjacent motif, and pull my loop through. So like I said, the half motifs are joined in exactly the same manner as the full motifs. So between each stitch, what I'm doing is dropping the loop from the hook, inserting it into the next stitch on the adjacent motif, through both loops, and then I go ahead and I pull the loop through. So I'm going to keep working in this fashion until I've joined all 10 stitches between the 2 points on the adjacent 2 motifs. And you'll see that as I'm going along here, I will end up with the same sort of triangle negative space in between the 2 full motifs and the 1 half motif. Same triangle spaces I ended up with between the full motifs. And we're going to get to that in the next step of the crochet along, where we get to make lots and lots of triangles to fill in those spaces. An astute viewer from one of my other videos noticed that I inadvertently changed hook sizes between videos and asked whether there was a reason for that, and the only reason is that I was not paying attention. So you'll see in this video that I'm using a different size hook than I mention in the instructions. And the reason for that is, again, to keep things matched up with the earlier mistake I made so that I have enough yarn to finish these off. All right, so now I've worked 9 stitches in between the 2 motifs. I'm going to go ahead and work the final stitch, remembering that I'm not joining up the points, not at this stage at least. I'll come back to those when I'm ready to do the triangles. So I've worked my last stitch up until the second to last step, and this is where I'm going to change colors and complete my next point. And of course, on the final round, I only have 1 stitch in my contrast color. So I'm going to go back to my color A and continue working. So this space in between here is not joined. This makes up one of the sides of the triangles that will be joined later when I'm ready to add those in. But as I'm joining up the half motifs, I need to work the sections or the areas in between the points, again in the same way as I did with the full motifs. So I'm just going to go ahead and work this section in the same manner as directed in the pattern until I get to my next point. And there I'll do my color change, like so. Make my point, and now I'm ready to do my next join. And you'll notice that the area where my next join goes, I skip a section on each of my full motifs, and now I'm ready to join here in my next section on my next adjacent motif. You might notice my camera bouncing a little bit right now, and that is because my cat is sitting on my video rig. So I'm gonna pause for a moment here to remove her, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, minus a cat, and having taken advantage of that little break to finish off the rest of the join for my first half motif. So here you can see that for the first half motif that I've joined, this could be either for the top or the bottom, that it's joined in two areas to two full motifs. And in theory then I would be ready to add on my next half motif in this section right here. And the error that I pointed out earlier, what I missed noting in the pattern is that after I've joined my first motif for the top and the bottom, I will need to join my next half motif in the starting area, as well as the two areas on the next two adjacent full motifs. So hopefully that makes sense. For now, I'm going to move on to talking about the quarter motif and how to join that up. So here you can see, again, I've made a sample quarter motif up to round 11, having worked just this first area for the last row up through the first point. And I've dropped the loop from my hook, which means I am now ready to join. So I'm going to line this up, and you can see here, if I move this, you can see it, that I'm going to join my quarter motif onto one area of the adjacent full motif and also one area of the adjacent half motif. So I'll go ahead and start doing that in the same manner as how I've joined the other motifs. Make sure I'm working in the right space here. So I've dropped my loop, I'm going to pull it through the correct stitch on the adjacent motif, and just start my join as you go process. So I'm going to work along this first area of the full motif, to which I'm joining my quarter motif. Remembering that there are always 10 stitches to join in between the points. I'm going to work my way across here. And in a similar fashion, when I'm joining, I'm always going to end up skipping an area between the joined areas. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Sometimes I think this joining can be a little bit, I don't know, fiddly, a little tedious maybe, but I still find join as you go methods to be much more preferable than trying to sew everything in when all is said and done, or crochet everything in. Clearly I needed to have put my cat into another room because she has once again jumped up on top of my sort of jury-rigged video setup. You can't see this on the camera, but the way I have this is I have a tripod, a mobile phone tripod, that is attached honestly to a wine crate right now that is acting as a nice sturdy base, except for when my cat happens to jump on top of it. This is Mira, my kitten, my 8-month-old kitten, who is pretty good at getting into just about everything. Anyway, so here I am at my last stitch for my join section, number 10. I'll go ahead and give my carry yarn just a little tug to make sure that all of my stitches are lined up in the way that I would like them to be. I'm going to switch my color, work my next point, and then switch back. And as I was saying earlier, I always end up with one skipped area when I'm joining. And by that I mean in between sections that I've used the join as you go technique, I will then work a next section that is not joined. And that of course leaves the empty space for my next triangle to be joined in the next step of the blanket. So here again I have 10 stitches in between the 2 points on the quarter motif. So much quicker to work these when I'm not joining. And I'll do my last color change here in just a moment. Work my last point. And now I have this little section of extra stitches to work through. Oh, everybody say hi to Mira. She's going to come visit for a moment. Actually, I'm going to move her out of the frame and continue on. So here I am ready to join the last section of my quarter motif. As you can see here, I have the half motif that I joined previously, and here I have the last area on my quarter motif, and these are just going to join up right next to each other, the same way that I do all of my other joining. I'm going to turn this around to get some better access. So I drop my loop, pick up the stitch next to the point on the adjacent motif, and pull my loop through. And then I just start working my join as usual. So as the pattern calls for, I make 2 stitches in my quarter motif into the first stitch here of this area. And then I continue on. I'm going to go ahead and ignore Mira for now because I am running on a bit of a deadline. I don't have time to edit this video with her out of it, so we'll just endure her tail being in the video for now. So I'm going to go ahead and work all the way to the end of this section. Oops. Using my join as you go technique. I know a lot of you out there have cats also. It's been fun to see their pictures on the Facebook group, helping out as cats do, usually by sitting on top of our work. All right, so here's my last stitch for the join. And you'll notice that I now have, oops, a finished off quarter motif and a finished off half motif. And true to form, Mira, my cat, is sitting off the camera frame here, right in front of my motifs, or right on top of them rather. So I will move her so I can show you the full sort of setup of what I have here. So it's hard to fit this all in the camera frame, but here I have the 2 full motifs. Next I joined 1 half motif. And just for demonstration purposes, although in the pattern I have you do all of the half motifs first, I went ahead and joined a quarter motif just to show you what that looked like. So that kind of rounds out our second part of our crochet along. The next part will involve making lots and lots of little triangles and sewing them into place. So I will be back with a new video for that next time. I hope you're having fun. Take care.